On today's show, it is not just Locked On Padres, it is also Locked On Royals. That's right, I'd be joined by my good buddy Jack Johnson to talk about this upcoming series between the Padres and Royals, the biggest storylines for the Royals, who are low-key good now, and whether or not the Padres can finally just get on a consistent track for this series. We'll be talking about a whole bunch more as well. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of not just the Locked On Padres podcast, but also the Locked On Royals podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, or you can check out my work at Just Baseball, a very good website, or my other podcast, Baseball versus the World. So you can check that out if you'd like. And if you were watching on YouTube, which you absolutely should, Locked On Royals and Locked On Padres, respectively, on YouTube, you might have seen that I accidentally played the ending graphic at the beginning there. So I'm a little rusty. You know, bear with me, folks. It's a Friday. What can I say? I'd be joined by Mr. Jack Johnson. It is our first time doing a crossover together. Hopefully not the last. Sir, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, man. I'm glad I could do this crossover. I don't do them too often, but kind of a fun series to do it for. Royals and Padres don't play that often. And I know here for Kansas City, it's a huge series. Should be big crowds all weekend long. So fun to get into this and see the other perspective coming in with the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, and it's funny because both of these teams, they first of all, they do have a connection, obviously. Yes. Last year, Seth Lugo and Maikel Garcia, both really efficient, solid starting pitchers, especially the latter. And Seth Lugo, at least, has been very, very good for this team. And I think that the Royals in general, and I mentioned this to you before we started recording, one of the more under-discussed teams, I think, so far this year. Like, yeah, they have Bobby Witt Jr., but it's been a lot more than that, I think. And it's kind of just really fun from afar as just an appreciator of baseball, just seeing that the AL Central it's not amazing, but it's not a joke anymore. And I think that there was that really consistent, like 3-4 year stretch where it felt like it was, all right, White Sox and Guardians, are they even good or are they just better than the other teams? But now it seems like there's a lot going on there. So what are kind of the biggest storylines you think for people who aren't familiar with the Royals going into the series?
Yeah, I mean, going back to this offseason, it was a huge one for J.J. Picollo and John Sherman, the owner and the general manager of this ball club, because I think the fan base had really gotten fed up to that point. That at this point, going into 2024, fans were tired of hearing about, oh, it's going to take an evaluation year. You got to rebuild. And even going back to their World Series runs, the Royals didn't spend any money. It was all about bringing up this core of prospects. And, going back to 2010, 2011, they were dubbed as maybe the best farm system that baseball had ever seen. So that was kind of the meat and potatoes of how those teams in the mid-2010s were so good. But they never spent any money. And last year, I think the fandom had hit kind of rock bottom. The mid-2000s were awful for the Royals, too. They had tied the 05 Royals with a 106-loss record. And then you go into last year where you lose 106, even with Bobby Witt Jr., even with Cole Reagans. It just didn't feel like they were anywhere close. And so for this offseason, to me, it was kind of after the lottery, because the Royals lost 106 and they're picking 6th in the Major League Baseball draft. Cleveland, who was much better than them, and Chicago are drafting ahead of them. So to me, that was kind of the sign of there's no need to tank anymore. There's no need to try to get a top draft pick, and they can't after this year. I believe that the lottery system, they have to pick outside the top 10. So now it's a matter of, let's see if we can bring some free agents into Kansas City, and they go after their bullpen first, which hasn't been too great of late. But they get Will Smith, they get Chris Stratton, they get Nick Anderson, they trade for John Schreiber. But the two big names were Maikel Garcia and Seth Lugo, of course, coming over from San Diego. And they have found a way to just stabilize this rotation. It's one of the top statistical rotations in all of baseball right now. And it's a breath of fresh air, because last year you really didn't know what you were going to get every 5th day. Now you feel pretty good about what you're going to get every 5th day. Maikel Garcia, though he struggled a little bit in the month of April, 3 straight quality starts going into tonight. He's going to be facing his former team. I mean, if you talk about the storylines, it's all been about pitching. I mean, yeah, Bobby Witt Jr. has been an MVP candidate. Seth Lugo's been a Cy Young candidate, even though he's not really dominating in the way some of those guys like Tarek Skubal or Tanner Houck are. But he's got the lowest ERA in baseball right now, and that's something I don't believe anybody thought would be possible when they inked them to a deal back in December.
Yeah, and I think what I really want to hone in on is the pitching, because the pitching has been, it feels like the previous host of this podcast, Ryland Stiles, would always talk about, like, they were expecting to get a lot more from some of their starting pitching prospects back in the day, Brady Singer being one of them. And while he is having a good season, a nice bounce back so far, it feels like this is a team that when they sign Lugo and Waka, it's, yeah, don't get me wrong, it's not going to necessarily put you in World Series contention. They aren't the flashiest names, but it does mean a lot when you can just get guys that you know can throw innings, frankly. And that means a lot, especially as a Padres fan here who has dealt with some bouts of, why is Rich Hill starting games for us down the line? Like, it's just insane that you get into that situation. But for the Royals, I think that they've needed that. I think they've needed a stabilizing force. But they're impressively good. I did not expect it to be this good so far. Plus 80 run differential. They're 35-23 on the season. Obviously, Bobby Witt becoming one of the best players probably in the game. Good defense, good power. He can steal bags. Like, doesn't strike out too much. He's amazing. Everyone knows him. Salvador Perez, I guess, is good defensively now, and then hits a home run every 3 minutes. So that's kind of cool. Congratulations on that. And then there's guys like Maikel Garcia, and then you're hoping that someone like Vinny Pasquantino kind of turns up. What do you think, aside from the obvious names, is someone for Padres fans to keep an eye out for this weekend, at least in terms of like the batters, position players?
Yeah, I think going into this series, you know, if you're not too familiar with Maikel Garcia, I mean, he was somebody I was really high on last year, and the organization always talked about him in a positive light. But kind of the funny thing about it, he was so small. I mean, he's like 6 foot, but he was about $170 last year, and everybody's going, "Can you play a third baseman that only weighs $170?" I mean, that's too small, because he was so fleet-footed, he was so good defensively, he was a shortstop. You know, his entire career, he played second base. And then right before he was called up last year, they said, go learn how to play third base. We'll see if you can do it. And not only did he learn how to play it, he's one of the better defensive third basemen in all of the American League right now. And the bat's really starting to come around. He slumped heavily back in April. There was a point in mid-April or toward the end of April, he was hitting like 164. And now you look up and he's hitting 270. So he's one of those guys at the top of the lineup. When he's going right, you can see how well it kind of bleeds into the rest of that lineup, because the top 4 guys, just being quite honest, like, those are the guys. The last 5 in the order, they're not given much right now. You look at Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Pasquantino, and even Pasquantino is coming off a leg contusion he suffered in the Minnesota series. He homered yesterday. He's still kind of underachieved a little bit this year. And then Salvador Perez turning back the clock, putting in a career year at the age of 34. Even us here in Kansas City are going, not only the numbers, I mean, we feel like the offensive numbers have kind of always been there, but defensively with the framing, stealing strikes, that came out of nowhere. And I'll probably tip my cap to Paul Hoover, the bench coach and catching coach for the Royals. He's done a really good job with Salvi behind the plate. But those 4, and more specifically Maikel Garcia for Padres fans, keep your eye on him because, you know, Bobby Witt Jr., Salvi, they're going to get the big praise. Even Vinny, I think, gets more praise than Maikel Garcia does. But when you see him play over there at the hot corner, it is really, really impressive. And to lead off games, he's going to be the first batter that the Padres will face in this series. And he likes to ambush. He's Alcides Escobar's cousin, who also liked to ambush the first pitch. So I guess it just runs in the family.
Yeah, hey, speaking of Alcides Escobar, little bit of shades of the vibe, at least statistically, of those old Royals teams, in the sense that great starting rotations we're going to get into even more. You've got a couple star players, and then there's guys that seem to just pinch in every now and then. And seriously, when it comes to the defense, the Royals are one of the best. They're 3rd in Major League Baseball as a team in defensive runs saved and outs above average, with only the Blue Jays and the Dodgers being ahead of them. They just are locking things down. So it feels like this might be one of those series where it's about who could just get the minimal amount of big hits, right? It might come down to just a few big hits. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of blowouts in this series necessarily, assuming the Padres pitching shows up to a degree, which has been You never know. Like, I don't know, man. That's my take on Padres pitching. I don't know sometimes. I just don't know what we're going to get. But it's going to be really fun. We're going to dive deeper into not just some other major storylines. I'm going to let Jack ask me some questions as well, being the merciful ruler of a podcast host that I am. And then also getting to, dive into pitching matchups and any other sort of things. But before we do that, I just want to take 1 second, folks, to talk to you about our good friends over at FanDuel. We love FanDuel. We've been having FanDuel as a sponsor since before last season, frankly. I'm pretty sure. I think. Maybe. But regardless, they have all sorts of deals all the times that you should check out. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a bag of yours home, like you're robbing the bank. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like when you play with FanDuel, folks. Right now, customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. For this series, Fernando Tatis Jr., we haven't talked about him. He's been a little bit cooking lately. He got robbed of another hit yesterday or 2 days ago. So maybe I might take over on Fernando Tatis Jr. Total basis tonight. But, folks, if you want to check out your bets, whether it be NHL, NBA, WNBA, MLB, maybe NASCAR somewhere. I don't know. I'm not a NASCAR guy, but you could check that out over at FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres and Locked On Royals crossover extravaganza. Myself, Javier Reyes, and Jack Johnson, bringing you all the good stuff for this series. Jack, let's keep talking, man. Let's just get into it. What questions do you have for me when it comes to the Padres this weekend? Because let me tell you, people love talking about the Padres for some reason. I mean, I know why, but it's just what a weird team to kind of figure out, I think.
A team that, kind of coming in, I feel like every series over the last month or so, I've had a really good grasp of what to expect, and probably going into tonight's because the Royals don't see the Padres that often. But I go back to last year when these two teams played in San Diego, and I just was in awe of how packed it was for a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday series. And I think for a lot of Royals fans, envious of that #1 because it'll be a big crowd this weekend, but also a weekend series. So to your point of talking about the Padres, they're a fun, vibrant team. They've been that way for a long time. But I guess going into tonight, where the Padres are at, I've been curious about what the NL West has looked like. The Dodgers, of course, being the talk of baseball, what they've been able to do. But then right now, kind of neck and neck with the Giants. What does the Padres fans feel at this point about how that race is going to go down between San Francisco, who's severely banged up, and this Padres team that might be catching a little bit of fire?
Yeah, the Padres are – it's the whole season has felt a little bit 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, and at times 1 step forward, 7 steps backwards, right? Like it seems like right when they're starting to catch fire, they turn it around in the opposite direction. And in fairness, same goes the other way. They get swept by Colorado. You get swept by Philadelphia. You have a really bad series after that. Like then they bounce back and they're 1 game above 500. So it's not as impressive as the Royals. I imagine the Royals record is what Padres fans expect and hope for, given that they have one of the best attendance in all of baseball. Right? Like they've been amazing for a few years now in that regard. They are exceptionally bad. Or I shouldn't say exceptionally bad. They're significantly noteworthy when it comes to playing in Petco. They aren't the same. For whatever reason, I think it's mental. It has to be at this point. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like I know it's a pitcher-friendly ballpark, but still. So that's one thing going for the Padres. They're playing in Kansas City, so they don't have expectations, I guess, maybe on them now. This has been a really hard team to evaluate because when it comes to individual aspects of players and certain development. So, for example, Jurickson Profar has literally been Juan Soto this year, and it's been one of the more inexplicable things in the sport. And while it's not going to continue at the Juan Soto level, it does seem like he's figured something out with hitting off-speed pitches, jumping on fastballs better, just putting together better at-bats. The hard hit rate is up to a degree, at least a degree that makes some of it sustainable. You can't really fake everything Profar is doing, with the exception of I don't think he's going to have Soto plate discipline skills. You've got Jake Cronenworth to bounce back this year in a major way. You had Jackson Merrill, who he's been in a rough slide lately, but still a pretty good productive player as a rookie, and especially compared to what they previously had with Trent Grisham. You've got all of that. Donovan Solano got brought in for the team. He's been a really nice, solid at bat. He's got let me see right here. What does he have right now? Let me see. He's got a 198 WRC plus in the few games he's played for the Padres. And you've got Luis Arraez, the big trade that happened on a Friday night when I was busy laying in my bed and then I had to get out of bed. He's got a 155 WRC plus with the Padres. He's got a 387 average. There's a lot going for them. They're much better this year in high leverage situations, which was famously the worst thing about them last year. They could not drive anybody in to save their life. They were one of the least clutch teams if you go by clutch team or clutch rating by Fangraphs, one of the 3 least clutch teams since 1996, which is when I was born. That's why I used that date. And the other 2 teams that were worse made the playoffs in 190 games. So it just shows you like how impressively disappointing the Padres were last year, given all of their talent. And they've even got some stuff from the starting pitching. Dylan Cease has been really good. Michael King, hit or miss. Yu Darvish, still pretty good, especially considering how old he is. And then you've got, who else is in this damn Padres rotation? I'm blanking now. Matt Waldron, who throws a knuckleball. He's been pretty effective lately. Their bullpen is amazing with Jeremiah Estrada and Robert Swarsley in the pack. And yet they still have this thing of inconsistency. They had the famous blow up against the Rockies. They were up 9-4, bullpen exploded. And then, of course, they got swept by the Rockies following a series in which they beat the Dodgers. And then you followed up by getting swept by Colorado, a team that they inexplicably don't know how to play. It's just such a hard team to get a grasp on. And it feels like they're a team that's a little bit more than numbers. A little bit more than on-field performance, because just the type of results that they have don't make a lot of sense. It just doesn't. You shouldn't be able to consistently beat teams like the Braves and the Dodgers, but then you struggle against the Rockies and for a second, the Marlins. They lose 1-9. Yes, they win the series, but you still lose 9-1 in the last game. That's weird. It's really hard to evaluate, man. So on one hand, the Royals are good, so that means the Padres will play good. That's what it means, you know what I mean? But I just don't know if all that behind the scenes whispers that we've seen from different websites, from The Athletic to San Diego Union Tribune, about the locker room and the clubhouse just not being all in sync. That's what this Padres team, the best way to explain them is, it doesn't feel like they're ever firing on all cylinders. The offense is on, pitching falls apart. Pitching's on, bullpen falls apart, and vice versa.
You know, I thought it was interesting the last couple of years. I mean, if you had to pick one team out there in Major League Baseball that really capitalized on being a buyer, I mean, not in a World Series championship, but being so aggressive, adding tons of talent. And then even last year, I mean, you kind of feel like, or going into the offseason, oh, they're kind of closing up that window. But to me, not so much, because then they go and acquire Luis Arraez far before this deadline even happened.
Yeah.
So do you think, even if the Padres hover around 500, maybe a few games below, maybe a few games above, that when we get to the deadline, they'll once again be buyers?
Absolutely. I've been hosting this podcast for 5 years, and I don't remember when they weren't buyers. The only time they haven't been buyers, frankly, was maybe the trade deadline from, like, was it 2 years ago? No, it was the off season before last year. Or before the year before that. So 2022 offseason was the only time I've seen them ever just not do too much. And even that year, they bring in Nick Martinez, they bring in Robert Suarez, Luis Garcia, some other guys. They still bring in stuff, but that's the only time I don't remember them being buyers. So I'd be shocked if they weren't. I don't know exactly what they'd be aiming for. There isn't, because of all the long-term contracts, you know, that are going for 10 years, even for another 4 or 5 years, that it's not like there's a lot of flexibility to just move out players. So unless that they think they're going to be like the Giants from a couple years ago, just platoon everybody, I don't know if it's going to be so many bats that they acquire. But here's the thing, AJ Preller, it seems like this is a real make or break season. And I think it should be. I was of the opinion that AJ Preller, if they were going to fire someone, I do think he earned that sort of action. They didn't do it, and so far it's been okay. But you've been the manager for this team. The general manager for this team since 2015, basically. And they've only won 90 games. Oh, wait, no, they haven't won 90 games at all. My apologies. They haven't won 90 games at all since AJ Preller has taken over. So while there's been so much flash, the substance, the consistency isn't there. And while I've got love for Machado and Tatis, this is a core group that you can't really trust. There are other core groups in baseball, like Cleveland, like Tampa, like the Dodgers, but even some of those middling teams that are still competitive. They don't fall off a cliff. And that's the problem with the Padres, right? So to me, with AJ Preller, some questions. It seems like ownership's been a little bit cagey about him. Peter Seidler, RIP, no longer there, who's a big fan of Preller's, his job might be on the line. So when a guy's job is on the line, you and I both know everything's on the table. So I could see them trading for anybody. I could see them giving up nearly anybody as well, especially, this might sound crazy, but even some of their top prospects, like Ethan Salas, who's really young. So AJ Preller might be thinking, well, whatever, this guy won't be ready in 3 years. So what do I care what happens in 3 years if I might get fired? So there's so it's both an exciting thing and a scary thing that they could completely blow up their farm for the 8th time. You know what I mean? Because this is a team that has not shown consistency. And what is a GM who potentially could get fired going to do? Make some big trades, to make some big swings for anybody. So I would absolutely see them be active at the trade deadline. I think a number 5 starter could be something that arises. Bullpen help is never something you don't like. And then a power bat, because with this team, the biggest story has been that they just don't have a lot of power. Outside Jerks and Profar, that should not be happening when you have Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado in your lineup. But alas, that has been kind of the case this year.
You know, last one for me here, because I think it was an article done by Tom Verducci about, you know, the Royals start where they've been at. I think it's perfect with the Padres coming in, because one of the teams that was labeled in that article about, you know, Royals fans being wary of was the 2021 Padres that got off to a really good start, were hot, and then kind of bottomed out toward the back half of the season. What do you remember about that team? Were you buying in way too early and then that happened? Because right now, a lot of fans that follow Locked On Royals are going, when can I finally go, oh, I should start prepping for playoff baseball. I should scoreboard watch, because, you know, it's May 31st, but there's still 100+ games to go, which is just crazy to think about.
Whew, man, you really triggered my PTSD on that season. It was an innocent time. It was, you bring in Darvish, you bring in Snell, you bring in Ha-Seong Kim, you know, you've got Tatis and Machado and all that, and they just collapsed in every way possible the second half. Guys like Tommy Pham and Trent Grisham were the worst high leverage players of the sport that year. Tatis kept getting hurt with the shoulder. I think that, and what's weird is Padres fans maybe Padres fans who are older and have seen this team through the years, maybe they're just, this is what's going to happen when a team isn't known for winning. You're always going to be cynical, especially when you've been following for a while. But if you're slightly more recent, if you're younger, that was the beginning of seeing, like, you can't trust this team, because 2021 really was just a nightmare. All they needed to do was just win a couple games, and they didn't. They don't have that mental, I'm not saying that they're mentally, like, not there and that it's a negative, but it's certainly not a plus. This team, whenever they're down in the hole or whenever things seem like they're not fully going their way, they don't have that dog, I guess, to use an overused phrase, in them whenever things are down. So this is a team, you might even see it this series. If the Royals get out to an early lead, let's say Dylan Cease, he's the first pitcher in this series. Maybe he has a little bit of a poor start. If they're up by like 3 after like the first 3 innings or something like that, you might even see a little bit of a like, dang, they're just not putting together productive at bats, swinging on first pitches, grounding out, weird strikeouts that don't make sense. You might start to see that vibe of a team that's like, here we go again, we're going to lose. You know what I mean? That just seems to be their energy. But if they're on fire, then yeah, you'll get to see some fireworks. But it's just kind of unpredictable, I think, with this team. And that 2021 season, man, my God. And it basically happened again in a different form last year, except that they were never good to begin with. Instead, it was just misery throughout. So pick your poison as a Padres fan between those 2 seasons. But Jack, before we continue, before you ask a couple more questions and we break down the pitching matchups, I just want to take a second to talk about our next sponsor, which is Stitch Fix. And anyone who follows me on Twitter, they know I'm a big fan of Stitch. You know, I'm talking about the Disney character. That's my dude. I love that man so much. He's the best. He's the GOAT. We love him a lot. But that's not what Stitch Fix is. Instead, they mean stitch in terms of the stuff for your clothing, the material. That's right. Stitch Fix is here to get you an outfit that makes you look real good. You get a stylist who understands your style, size, and most importantly, your budget. They do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. And as someone who doesn't have the best fashion sense in the world, having someone that can curtail all of my preferences and give me the best type of clothes and ideas, I love it. You can order boxes for everything you want. You can do plenty. Your stylist can help you out and find the best pieces for you, almost like they have, what is it called? Telekinesis, which is the one that makes you read minds. Is it telekinesis?
Telekinesis, yeah.
It's I get that and the other one mixed up so much, but whatever it is, that's what it feels like when you're using Stitch Fix, that they just know what you want and it'll appear there right for you. And if you don't like it, don't worry. You can get your money back too, folks. That's right. Stitch Fix is ready. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. So guys, style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. That's right, folks. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. Go check it out. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here on the Locked On Padres and Locked On Royals crossover extravaganza. Jack, it has been so much fun so far. Let's talk about some pitching, specifically because, again, it seems defense, Bobby Witt Jr., and then starting pitching has been the strength of the Royals. And we're not necessarily going to see that night one. We will see that with the Padres, but Dylan Cease versus Maikel Garcia. What can you kind of tell us really quickly about Maikel Garcia? Because he, at least just in terms of numbers, has not been as good as he was last year for the Padres. But still, as we mentioned in the first segment, a guy who's been able to throw innings and be solid.
Yeah, I remember putting out a tweet. Oh, it was after his start against, I want to say, Texas. Maikel Garcia's ERA was over 5. I think it was around like 5.48, 5.5. And I went back to the month of April last year for San Diego. He was pretty much the same pitcher, like 5.5 something ERA. Wasn't very good. And then went on this ridiculous tear, I think it was, where he only allowed like 9 runs over 9 starts or 11 runs over 9 starts. Like really found his groove. And kind of in the middle of that was when Garcia took a perfect game into the 8th inning against the Royals in San Diego. So what he's done the last 3 starts kind of seems like maybe not the beginning of that, but certainly more comparable to where Maikel Garcia was last year. A big problem of his early on in the year, I think, was just high pitch count early on in games, you know, throwing 80, 90 pitches by the 5th inning, and you just couldn't work too deep. Recently, he added a slider to his repertoire, and he's going to throw that a lot tonight. Like, he didn't have a slider at all, and Brian Sweeney, the pitching coach with the Royals, they kind of worked on some stuff, and now he's throwing that slider a lot, and it's really kind of been his strikeout pitch, or one of his strikeout pitches alongside that changeup, which, of course, he's very well known for. But now we've seen the last 3 starts. He's worked into the 7th inning, the 6th inning. Kind of unfortunate he imploded a little bit in the last time out against the Rays. He had a no-hitter going into the 6th inning, and then Matt Quatrero left him in a little bit too long. So the line wasn't as pretty as it could have been. But, yeah, when he's rolling, when that changeup's on and that slider is sharp, it's really tough to square him up because now he's starting to hit 95 and 96 with his fastball. So kind of a little bit of a resurgence with Maikel Garcia, which never happened with Royals free agents coming in. They always seem to regress when they got here. But Garcia's starting to look much better over his last 3.
Hey, free agents regressing when they come to the Royals. Believe me, Padres fans feel the same way, except it would be batters. They tend to be the ones that really regress heavy when they're with the Padres, including they even cursed Juan Soto. People forget for that first month and then the second half of the 2022 season, they kind of cursed him a little bit. Again, the Padres stench, it gets to everybody. Yeah, but I think Garcia is going to be an interesting one tonight, as will Dylan Cease be. I'm expecting a really good start from Dylan Cease in this game. He hasn't had the best May, 3.9 ERA in May. In his last start, he did give up 4 earned runs. Hold on one second. Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, no, never mind. I thought a big trade just happened. Never mind. The Jeff Passan notifications always scare me.
Too.
Yeah, I was like, I saw Brett Beatty of the Mets, and I was like, oh, no, they're just sending him down. Okay. But still, hey, it's that season. We're getting there, man. You're getting that itch, you know, the jitters and whatnot. Soon we're all going to be checking our phones 24/7. But back to Cease. You know, he gave up 3 earned runs and 5 to the Rockies. After that, 5 earned runs to the Braves in 4 innings. Easily his worst start of the year. And last week, or his last start, gave up 4 against the Yankees, but it was 6 2/3, and he did get 9 Ks with 0 walks, and it was kind of just a really dumb pitch that he made to Aaron Judge on 0-2 that kind of messed up his day, that kind of made it spiral a little bit. So in general, I think Cease is due for a really, really good start. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens tonight. His fastball velo has been up this year. He's not walking batters because Ruben Niebla, Padres pitching coach, a king, making every pitcher better. So he's been dynamite. So while, yes, the 3.29 ERA is a little unsightly for some people who think about aces, that's been a little bit inflated slightly by the Yankee start, and I just think that he's going to be great. The FIP is still really good at 2.77. So this one, at least on paper, is one that the Padres should have an advantage. But again, we don't know because this Royals team clearly has a lot more in them than sometimes meets the eye. For Saturday's game, my friend, we've got, let's see if I could just pull it up real quickly. We've got Joe Musgrove versus Alec Marsh. What can you tell us about Sir Alec Marsh? Because Lord knows I don't know too much.
Yeah, I don't think much of baseball knows a lot about him. Last year, he made his debut. I really like the swing and miss stuff, but the ball left the yard a lot. He was somebody that couldn't keep it in the yard, was hit around in a couple of early starts in his career, but it has been a transformation, and maybe the biggest transformation we've seen in the Royals rotation, because you go back, 5-6 years, they didn't really develop any pitching. You look at Brady Singer, who's had a much better year this year, but Brady Singer, Chris Bubich, Daniel Lynch, Jonathan Heasley, they didn't really take the same path that we all expected them to, being first-round picks. And, Alec Marsh was somebody coming out of college that had the good velo. And then once he got to the Royals organization, the numbers weren't great, but suddenly this year, working with Royals pitching coach Brian Sweeney, you have seen a transformation. He throws a lot of different pitches. His stuff is firm. He gets a ton of swing and miss. And I always keep waiting for that start to go, okay, that makes sense, because a number 5 starter shouldn't have 20 swings and misses and a start. And you kind of just hope that the regression doesn't come at the wrong time. But honestly, he got hit by a line drive on the form a couple of starts ago, missed a start or two, and then came back and just took it in stride. There wasn't any regression there. It didn't look like he was rusty. And, last time out, he gave up 5 runs, and that was against Minnesota on Memorial Day. But he went 7 innings, so he was able to save the bullpen a little bit. He's got impressive stuff. But again, when he's not on, you're going to see the command be a little bit shaky, a little bit spotty, and then probably leaving one right down the middle where a Padres hitter could do some serious damage with it.
I see that. It should be an interesting one. And while, yes, in theory, the Padres have Joe Musgrove going on the mound, you would assume, I don't know who Alec Marsh is. Obviously, Musgrove's the advantage here. This guy's been one of the steadiest starting pitchers in baseball. Not necessarily this year, 5.6 ERA on the season. He's also one that if you pull up the Baseball Savant, you won't see the best stuff in the world. But I think he really is someone who we've seen a lot of this could be attributed to injury. His velo was down for a lot to start this year until one of his last starts before he hit the IL, when he had a good one against the Reds. 2 earned runs across 6 innings, no walks, 9 Ks. He was much better in that one. His last one against the Yankees, 5 1/3, 1 earned run against the Yankees, ain't too bad. Also didn't walk anybody. So the stats you are currently seeing, they are representative of what Joe Musgrove was before, but it might be last year gets shut down with an injury. And we've seen that it seems like he's still working his way back from it. Unlike, say, a Manny Machado, where it's like, yeah, I know that you had surgery, but like you were also bad last year too before we had that issue. So we don't know what's going on with him. But for Joe Musgrove, I'm curious to see. The curveball has looked a lot better. It is one of his best pitches this year. Opponents are hitting only 237 off of it, but the fastball hasn't been right. And I think that that's because it's a little bit of a house of cards situation where he hasn't trusted it, and all of his other stuff isn't working the same way. So therefore, opponents are kind of waiting on what has been his least effective pitch, although he does put a lot of spin on it to make it better than most other low velocity fastballs that you'll see in Major League Baseball. But it's kind of like a wait and see approach, right? Like, I don't know fully if he's back. Just came back off the IL, obviously. So we'll have to see. But I will say the stats do not fully represent him. He might be turning the corner. Although if he gets lit up tonight, that would be really bad for the Padres and also not a big surprise. So that arguably the start for the weekend that I am most interested in as a Padres fan. I want to see, because if they could get Joe Musgrove back, the issues with a Michael King, the unpredictability of him, and a Matt Waldron all of a sudden become a lot easier to stomach. If you think that you have, who has been, seriously, like, I'm not making that up, he hasn't had an ERA over like 3.15 these past 3 years. Like, he's really consistent. So that'll be a really interesting one to watch. And then the last game on Sunday, Michael King versus Cole Reagans. Man, Cole Reagans. You want to talk about a guy who the 3.49 ERA doesn't tell the full story. I have him in fantasy. This guy has some absolutely breathtaking starts, 83 strikeouts to 22 walks on the season. He's been featured on Pitching Ninja a lot. Can you tell us any more?
Yeah, I mean, this is when we just talked about Alec Marsh being the pitching development for the Royals. When Cole Reagans was acquired last year in their Roldis Chapman trade, excuse me, when he was acquired last year in the Roldis Chapman trade, he came over and I'm thinking there's nothing that really stands out. He didn't throw hard. He was sitting about 92, 93 with Texas, had some good pitches, but it was more so about the spin rate to me. And now when he comes over, I mean, he was dubbed the ace. He was the opening day starter for the Royals. And now he's kind of changed a little bit who he is. And I love that about a pitcher when you can adapt to different things. And, you know, he's somebody that when he first came over to Kansas City early on this year, he's throwing 98, 99, 100 right out of the gates and a whole different selection of pitches to work with. The last 3 starts, it's been very interesting to me because there was this sense of panic of Royals fans. He's throwing like 94, 95 in the first. And we're going, oh, no, the velo's down. What's that going to mean? And it was that Oakland game 2 starts ago. Started on a Friday. He's throwing 94, 95, and it's like second inning, third inning, what's happening? And then all of a sudden in the 5th and the 6th, he's going 98, 99, 100, as if he was just saving it for either better command or to throw off the timing because you have to worry about the wipeout changeup he has, the wipeout curveball, the wipeout slider. But that fastball, with the spin rate it has, I mean, we talk about with sinkers hitting a bowling ball, hitting that pitch that has an elite spin rate at 98, 99. It's why he gets so many swings and misses, and it's why it's happened a few times this year. Baltimore and the Angels squared him up for 7 runs. They can get on him, but it's more so kind of with Marsh when the command goes awry, when he's not getting ahead in the count. Minnesota in the first inning in his last start were able to take a few of those pitches, spit on a few of the pitches, and that led to an iffy start. He had 5 innings of 2 earned runs, and that didn't work as deep into the game as he'd like to, but they put together great ABs. For San Diego, facing somebody like that, if you can lay off those pitches, you might be able to chase him in the 5th. If you can't, he's going to have 10, 11, 12 strikeouts by the 6th or 7th inning.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. It seems like the only weakness he's had this year is his cutter, just based off of the, peripheral stats. So we'll see. But man, it doesn't matter if you have one bad pitch when every other one is like a super AAA plus. And it's not like it's a historically bad pitch. It's just for some reason he's struggling with that right now. Last year, not nearly as bad with the statistics on it. He reminds me every year there's always a pitcher that no one realizes is low key an ace. And then the next year he does it again, and we're like, "Oh wait, no! Like we should have been paying attention." A version I think of that of Corbin Burns, his second year when he won that Cy Young. People were like, "Yeah, he's good, but whatever." And then it's like, "No, like guys, pay attention. Trust me, this guy's legit." That's what Reagans feels like. On the Michael King side, there are times when he will look like Cole Reagans, and times when he looks like moving him to the starting rotation is a mistake. 74 strikeouts to 29 walks on the season. He's a baseball savant guy. You put up the baseball savant, he will get those whiffs every start, including the bad ones. But the hard contact has killed him. As of late, he's been very, very good. His past 2 starts, 300 runs and only 1 earned run, respectively. But he's the type of guy that has been Jekyll and Mr. Hyde all year. Historically good, one of the best starting pitching performances the Padres have had of this century against the Dodgers. 7 innings, no runs, 11 Ks against all those MVPs, then gets torched against the Rockies, giving up 6 against them the next game. So that's been his whole season, though. So if the good version of him shows up, part of this is that he's, transitioning to the relief pitcher role. That's fine. I get it. He's still working out some things. But for right now, just in terms of this weekend series, very unpredictable pitcher. Although sometimes that changeup is just devastating and gets batters, and you will see it featured. But he's the type of guy you'll know very early whether or not this is going to be the good Michael King start. But with a team like the Royals that doesn't have necessarily a ton of heavy hitters, you'd think, oh, he'll succeed. Just make sure you watch out for Bobby Witt and Salvador Perez. But that hasn't been the case because the Rockies don't have any of those guys, and they were able to torch him up. So that's one that I'm looking for. If he has another good start, then I may start to buy in. But in terms of right now, he's a low-end 4 because I just don't know what we're getting from him. It could be worse, but like I said, if Musgrove starts to turn into Musgrove, this won't be as much of an issue. But for now, hard to gauge what you're going to get from this guy. I'm not even kidding. Go look up his numbers, like 10 strikeouts against the Brewers that gets torched in 3 2/3 against the Rockies, right? Like he's a weird guy. So we're going to have to see how it pans out, especially considering he was kind of the centerpiece of the Juan Soto trade. So hopefully he has a good weekend start. But again, I'm not ready to go and believe in him just yet. I need a little bit more consistency. But Jack, man, this has been fun. I love talking some Royals stuff because I feel like nobody else does, man.
Hey, this has been so much fun. I wish the Royals and Padres played more because I'm like, man, I wish there was a series coming up not too far down the road because this was a lot of fun and I think helpful to a lot of people out there for your Padres fans to know more about the Royals. And I know a lot of people going to the game tonight going, I like the Padres. I just don't know what their fans are thinking about the season or what their host is thinking about them. So that's definitely going to help everybody out.
Absolutely, sir. Everybody, you can go check out Locked On Royals wherever you get your podcasts from. You can follow Jack on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. And you can, of course, follow me at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. And Locked On Padres on Twitter and Locked On Padres on YouTube, Royals respectively. You guys, come on, you get the point by now. This has been so much fun, man. Can't wait for the series. Really excited to see how it all plays out. Until next time, everyone, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies, and stay, what's a good R word for Royals fans? Let's see. Stay
respectful.
Stay respectful. I like that. Royals fans. Until next time, take care.